All right, so let's start with the simplest. And when I say simplest, I mean the one that really doesn't require a whole lot of money. Wholesaling. Wholesaling is by far one of the easiest ways to get into real estate if you have little money. If you have $500 to $1,000, you can absolutely get into wholesaling. And some people say, well, what's wholesaling, Todd? And for me, that's very, very simple to break down for you. Wholesaling is exactly what it says. Think about this. When you go into Costco or you go into one of these big box stores and you buy things in bulk or you buy a big item, you can typically get it for a cheaper price. And if you think about local sports teams, what do? They go to these big warehouses, right? Or Costco's or Sam's Club or whatever it is, and they buy a bunch of bulk candy, a bunch of bulk drinks. They then take it back to wherever the sports teams are at. They put it in the concession stand, they mark it up a little bit, and they then sell it to the public. That is exactly what wholesaling in real estate is all about. All right, now I'm going to give you a disclaimer. I don't know what state you're in, so you need to search your state laws about wholesaling. It's legal in almost every single state, but there are some rules in some states that apply to wholesaling. You need to understand that first, okay? That's number one. So when we talk about wholesaling in real estate, here is the very basic way that you do it, okay? You have to find a cheap property, a property that you can buy at a discount, okay? And once you find that property at a discount, you put it under contract. Once you put it under contract, just as if you were buying it, you then take that contract and you have the ability to assign that contract to another buyer who will pay more for it. So if we just do simple math, let's say you put it under contract for $10,000 to the seller of that home or property. You then market that contract out to cash buyers and end buyers or investors that want to buy that property. But instead of saying it's 10,000 bucks, you could now say, "Hey, I got this contract for assignment, list all the details for the home, what it's going to take to rehab it, and what the after repair value is." The after repair value is what is that home worth after you fixed it all up and you're able to refinance it or sell it on the open market. And you could say, "I'm going to sign this contract for $20,000. Now, we'll get in the numbers here in a second. But if those numbers work and you find an investor that you can assign this contract to for $20,000, you only have it under contract for 10,000 bucks. So what do you do then? Nothing really special, okay? You do a assignment of contract to that end buyer, and then everything moves along the process as you had dictated and negotiated with the contract. At some point, it gets to the closing table with a title company, and that end buyer that you assigned the contract to is going to come in, and they're going to pay the $20,000 to buy that home. That money is going to go directly to the seller. Well, guess what? The seller was only expecting $10,000. So what do? You get what's in between. You get a $10,000 assignment fee. And that is the real basic way to wholesale real estate. Now, there's some things. It's not as easy as what I made it just sound. Number one, you got to find the deal. And finding the deal sometimes tends to be the harder part of the whole piece. But once you understand how to find the deal, then wholesaling becomes easy. And you can do it one of two ways. There's actually a multitude of ways, but I'm going to tell you the basic ways. Number one, you can go drive neighborhoods. Go drive parts where there's, houses that are boarded up. There's houses that are behind on taxes, and just find some properties that you think that maybe the owner would want to get rid of, right? Like tall grass, fallen gutters, broken windows, things of that nature. All right, so how do we find properties? I just told you that you can drive neighborhoods. You can look for houses that have boards on them, cracked windows, tall grass, gutters that are fallen, properties that look like they're not taken care of. And you got to find the owner's information. How do you do that? Well, you could just knock on the door if somebody looks like they're living there and see if you can make contact with the owner of that property. Or you can skip trace them online. You can find some contact information from them. The internet is your friend. So however you can find that information from, you could send a letter to their house. You could mail a letter. There's systems out there where you can skip trace folks and find their contact information. But at the end of the day, you have to get to that owner. And you got to be able to talk to them about the property. Now, remember, real estate's a relationship game, right? So at the end of the day, you have to figure out a way to develop relationships with these people when you find these properties. Sellers of properties, they will sell properties to people that they know, like, or trust. So if they don't know you, they obviously can't like you, but in that phone call or in that conversation with them, they can get to know you, they can get to like you, and they can get to trust you. But that's on you to make them get to that point. And if you can convince them to sell property at what the property value is worth as is right there, to where you know that you still have numbers in there to be able to sell it off to an investor, it could be a good wholesale deal. Now, the problem with a lot of wholesalers and what drives me nuts, and I don't have any problem buying a property off of a wholesaler, And if they make 20, 30, 40K off of a wholesale deal, I don't give a shit. It doesn't matter to me as long as the numbers work for what my goals are. The problem with wholesalers are sometimes they get greedy or sometimes they're uneducated. And I think a lot of investors, a lot of bigger investors, especially like myself, we get frustrated with wholesalers that just don't know their numbers. If a wholesaler says this property is going to take 30,000 in rehab, but it's really going to take 60,000 in rehab, that tells me they don't know what they're doing. So you have to be able to at least understand how much it's going to take to fix a property up, or at least get close, right? And at the beginning, that might be kind of hard. So that's going to take a little bit of researching. That's going to take you self-educating yourself to really understand how much it takes to rehab a property. Because at the end of the day, it's a very simple formula, okay? A lot of investors that are out there, and this is the formula that you have to keep in your mind. A lot of investors that are out there, they want to be all in on a property. By the time they've rehabbed it, by the time they're ready to refinance it or sell it, they want to be all into a property at 70 to 75% of the after repair value. So if that property is going to be worth $100,000 that investor can sell it off for when they're done fixing it up, or they can refinance from a bank, then their all-in number needs to be $75K. So if you're saying the property is going to take $20K in rehab, that means that they can only purchase that property for $55,000. Okay. Now those numbers are a little bit off because there's some holding cost in there and things like that. So if they can only buy a property for $55,000, that tells you that's the most that you're going to be able to sign that property for, that contract for. So when you're negotiating with the seller, then you need to get it under contract for less than 55. So you would, in this case, at most try to get it under contract for 45,000. If you can get it lower, great. But if you get under contract for 45 and then you assign that contract to an end buyer at 55 and the numbers work for that end investor, well, now you can make a $10,000 assignment fee. And that's very simply. Now, how much money do you need to get into wholesaling? If you're going to bootstrap and you're going to go out and you're going to drive properties, you're going to find properties that are abandoned or they're, look like they haven't been taken care of, or they're just neglected, and you can get those sellers on the phone or you can make contact with them. If you can do that, $500 is all it takes. Okay. Or even $100 in some situations. And that is only for your earnest money. Typically you want to put some earnest money down with the contract when you get the contract signed by the seller. So you're going to put $100 down, $500 down, $1,000 if that's what they need, whatever it's going to take to get that done. But you can do it with very little. You can do it with $100. And that's what you do. There's no other money that you need along the way during that deal. And then you got to sit back and you got to coordinate the transaction. And when it closes, you get the difference between what that's end buyer is going to pay and what that beginning seller agreed to. And that's how you make the assignment fee. You make that in between. Now, you can do this by bootstrapping, going out, driving neighborhoods, and you can do that. There's also all kinds of programs that are out there. I'm not going to name them all here, but you can find them to where you can go out and you can print list off based on criteria. You can look for all multifamily properties. You can look for all tax lien properties. You can look for all properties where they look like they have an owner that doesn't live there, that they live out of state. And at the end of the day, you can create these lists. You can go drive them. You can start sending postcards to them. You can start sending letters to them. You can skip trace them, start calling them. But it's going to take work up front. And if you don't have a lot of money to begin with, to buy lists, to pay for software, well, then you need to go out and just drive, put the time in. Find yourself. What I used to do all the time was I used to just get myself lost in the city. Now I'm from the city, and it's very hard for me to get lost. But I would go out and I would try to find streets that I'd never been on, neighborhoods that I had never seen before. And I would go through and just look at all of the properties. I'd find properties that are behind on taxes that looked like they weren't taken care of. Older owners that were up in age that had a lot of equity in the house. That is how I would absolutely find these properties. It's called bootstrapping. And we don't have a lot of money. That's exactly what you have to do at the beginning. So you got to ask yourself, how much capital are you working with to get started wholesaling? And if you don't have a lot of capital, what are you willing to do? What are you willing to sacrifice to go out and find deals? Now, that was a very basic explanation of wholesaling, okay? But wholesaling is pretty simple. If you want to scale it, it's going to take a lot more work, and you're going to have systems and processes in place to be able to scale it at a high level. But if you want to just do it in your local area, then you absolutely can get out and you can bootstrap it. Now, how do you find your buyers? That's what you ask. Like, how do I find an end buyer? If I get it under contract at a good price, how do I do this, Todd? Well, you have Facebook groups. You have community networking groups that meet up once a month. You can go and search all of the online posts on, whatever the real estate investing network is on Facebook. Type in keywords like cash buyers. Just monitor those. You're going to find the investors in the area. You're going to find the ones that are cash buyers. Put out Put out posts out there looking for cash buyers in this area and let them know that you have properties. Network with realtors, network with other investors, and you can find a good pool of buyers. But remember, at the end of the day, the numbers have to work. So if you can't get it under contract for a number that's going to work for an end buyer, you're really just spinning your wheels. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you find solid end buyers, because you don't want to have something under contract and then the end buyer not come back and close the deal. So what's very important, and you can get these online, you can go to an attorney, you need to have, one, purchase agreements to get it locked under a purchase agreement when you first start. Number two, you have to have an assignment of contract, usually a one-pager that you can send off to whoever your end buyer is going to be. And you can use these one-pagers to assign the contract out. That's pretty much all the paperwork that you're going to need, okay? There's not a whole lot more that goes into that. When you put it under a purchase agreement, though, when you lock it up with the initial seller, you want to make sure that you give yourself as much time as you can squeeze out of that seller, right? So for your inspection contingency, try to get 60 days. Try to get at least 45 days, because ultimately, whoever that end buyer is going to be that you're going to sign the contract to, they're going to want to try to get in and see the property and do their own inspection. So make sure you leave yourself rooms that are out. Good contracts when you're wholesaling allow you the opportunity to get out of those contracts for contingency reasons for the longest period of time that you possibly can. If you figure out that you're not going to be able to sign this thing out, or you have trouble getting it off and assigning it to an end buyer, you want to be able to walk away from this thing if you don't have the ability to buy it. Now, here's what I would tell you. I never wholesale a property if I can't actually buy that property myself. I'm not going to do that to sellers. And if you do that, word to get around, you'll ruin your reputation. And I'm telling you that real estate is a relationship game, and you want to make sure that people respect what you've done. They want to know that you treated them right. And if you're just walking away from deals all the time, people are going to know that, and you're not going to get a great name in this game. So if you're not willing to buy the property, don't wholesale. Now, the big wholesalers out there and all these online gurus will tell you that's the wrong way. What I'm telling you is I care more about relationships than what some of these guys might do. If you want to do it on a big scale, there's probably going to be quite a few properties that you're going to have to walk away from. But at the end of the day, that is the basics of wholesaling 101. All right, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you guys. This cigar is driving me nuts on the left side of my body. One, I don't smoke with my left hand when I smoke cigars. Number two, Miles put it here thinking it was going to be a great idea. I don't think so. I'm going to move this to where it's a little more comfortable for me. I enjoy my cigars as much as the next guy, but it has to be comfortable. Reaching for it. So we're done with wholesaling. We're going to jump into number two, the basics. And this is really how I got my start.